And it may look daunting, but the thing is, you really can do a rain garden any size. I mean, whatever works for you. It doesn't have to be the ultimate thing, but just the fact that you're making an attempt to put plants in the ground in a place that collects water that infiltrates, you're doing something. And I know many examples of people in neighborhoods who've done this themselves with just a couple family members. I know people who have worked with nursery people that already do work on their property, landscaping and such, and have been willing to go for the adventure. So imagine different ways of doing it in addition to the things you heard here tonight. There's all kinds of ways of doing it. There's all different sizes of rain gardens. There's all different kinds of situations. The first handout I want to give you is actually a Penn State Extension publication, and it's the third of a series of 3 on rain gardens. So this is their latest iteration of rain garden information, and it's just devoted to the plants. And that's what we're going to, we don't have a whole lot of time, so we're going to focus on that. And it says some things you've already heard, so you can skim through that at your own leisure. What they do is they talk about the fact that you can put all kinds of plant materials in a rain garden, from small trees down to ground covers. But there are places where they work and they don't work so much. Now, since you're working with a rain garden, which is essentially a depression, a bowl, with the lowest area and then sloping sides, and then the upper area, which is the berm that was referred to, or the outer edges, you're going to have 3 different kinds, at least 2 or 3 different kinds of conditions relative to the amount of moisture that the garden is receiving. So the ones that are on the lowest part are going to be what they refer to in this as the Zone 1 wet zone. That's on the front page there. And then as you turn the page, it lists shrubs, perennials, ferns, and trees that would be appropriate for that. You have to pay attention to this differentiation of tolerance of moisture, because it's an example of what we always say in master gardeners, which is our mantra is the right plant in the right place. We don't want you to put an inappropriate plant in a place where it's going to fail. So this is the same thing, and here the factor that's most important is the amount of moisture for a length of time. Like Madge said, it will drain anywhere from 24 to 48 hours if it's properly constructed. But there's a lot of plants that even can't tolerate, having their roots covered with water for less than 24 hours. So when you start looking at the names of these plants, you will see the differences. The Zone 2 is referred to as mesic. Mesic really refers to the moisture. So mesic plants and mesic soils are those that are moist and can be wet for some period of time. But there's going to be less water in the middle or the mesic zone standing for a certain period of time. So these plants are not as moisture tolerant as those in the first zone, the wet zone, but they still will take some exposure. And then finally, the third zone, which they refer to here as the transition zone, would be the plants that are going to be and have their feet wet for the least amount of time. And it even could go so far as to include those that are up on the berm. And that group of plants can be your typical garden plants, what you put in your flower beds. In fact, some of them in the second zone are the same. In fact, some of them in the first zone are the same. I have a flower bed, it's a long bed along the fence, where the ground tends to be moist. And I had some of these swampy plants growing there. There isn't standing water, ever, but it's always moist. So you'll know where these places are on your property, where they're more moist or they're very dry. You'll see an asterisk on some of these names, and the asterisk on page 35, I guess it is. Is that right? 5. It's 3 out of 5. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on. The asterisk indicates plants that are typically suitable for Zone 2 of the rain gardens. So there are some of those in zone 1 that actually would be appropriate in zone 3. So we're not going to look at pictures of all these tonight. And this isn't an all-inclusive list. It's just a list to get you started. The other thing I wanted to go over again with you as gardeners, you may be aware that every plant has 2 names or more. The one name they all have is a scientific binomial, which is a genus and species, and it's unique. Every living thing that's been identified has a binomial name. And so that is the name you're going to be looking for when you want to identify a specific plant at the time of purchase or at the point of choosing. Because the second name, or multiple names, the redundant names, are all what we call common names. And these are the names that people have chosen to give them. And they can, there could be many names for plants that are quite different from one another. So the first name here would be black chokecherry. That would be the common name, and the scientific name would be Aronia melanotropum. So when you are actually identifying and purchasing plants, you have to keep that in mind. The second handout is more of the same, but I think it has helpful aspects to it. So on the left column of these plants for rain gardens, you'll see first the listing of shrubs. And you'll see the Latin name, the scientific name. And those are actually not in any particular, you'll notice, they're not sorted alphabetically. Neither is the common name. But what they've done with this spreadsheet is to sort it by soil moisture. So when you're looking at shrubs, you'll see initially plants that are good in wet, moist areas, and then you'll go down to plants that are good in moist areas, and then you'll go to either wet, dry, or most moist, dry, or dry. So as you go down in grouping, you're going toward plants that are going toward drier and drier conditions. And that's very useful because then you can figure out, okay, that last one, Durvilla, Onicera, that's going to be in zone 3, right? Where there's the least amount of water. So it's organized by shrubs, small trees, large trees. And large trees are probably not going to be something you'll put in your rain garden. But it's good to know what our moisture-loving trees are, because as Madge said, there may be some place in your property where you'd like to have a tree, and that would be appropriate, and you have room for it. Second page, the herbaceous perennials. Now, what this means is they're not woody plants. That's what herbaceous means. So they're going to be there. You're going to see growth from either nothing or some kind of basal leaves. You're going to see growth, stems, leaves, flowers, all in the growing season. And then when it gets cold enough, it's all going to be knocked off and die from that top growth or the roots up. So that's what herbaceous means. You won't have any woody stems or things remaining. And those also have been sorted by moisture conditions. And then finally, grasses, sedges, rushes. And then finally, a few ferns. So this is a nice way to learn more about the plants than you could have learned from that first handout. For instance, they tell you the sun requirements, the eventual height of the plant, when it blooms, whether or not it attracts pollinators, the hardiness zone. You know, we're in zone 7 here, so anything here is going to be fine. And also some specific comments. So I think this is actually from a earlier Master Gardener brochure that no longer is in publication, so I'm glad I got it. So this is handy if you use those two in conjunction. And finally, since we all have or have had deer, yeah, let me get a question.
What is the, in the comments it says for one of them, the cardinal flower, it needs disturbance. What does that mean? Does it need to be?
What page? This is on the herbaceous.
It's on the green on page 1 of 3. It just says needs disturbance. I didn't know if that would be like split or something.
Well, one thing I do, I've never seen it quite put that way, but cardinal flower will find its place. You will plant it someplace, and you'll say, oh, that's gorgeous, you know, and hummingbirds came to it. It's remarkable. It's beautiful. It did its job. I have some that I planted near a pond, and some of it ended up on the rocks that were covered with moss on the pond and ended up almost in the pond. But I found it on the other side of my yard. So maybe they mean for it to propagate widely, you need some disturbance. I actually, thank you for pointing that out. I never thought about that. But it will find where it's happiest. So now I have it growing across the yard in a place that's moist, and it's actually doing better there than it did at the original site. And it also seems to be a little not long-lasting necessarily. You know, a given plant won't necessarily come back after a few years, but you'll find it elsewhere because it seeds very widely.
So it's not on the cusp of being invasive, other than it
I would
self-seeds.
never consider
No,
part
it's
of
a
the flower
great-
to be
it's a great thing to
invasive
have,
because
yeah.
I want as much of it as I
Yes,
can
yes.
possibly get. It's
I
just
just
a
had my
beautiful
first
plant.
hummingbird online yesterday, and I was so excited.
It's amazing. I mean, I was standing by my pond because I like to walk around every day and look. This is some other year or years past. And there I was, and there was a cardinal flower, and in came a hummer right there. So I just stood still, and it went through every single blossom before it went off.
I would set up my camera on a tripod because I kept missing them. I'd set it up on the tripod right near the feeder, and I had a remote that I could click the camera.
Cool.
And that's how I got a hummingbird, because they're so quick.
Yeah.
They're so quick.
See the joys that are yet to
Oh,
come.
yeah.
Okay, so, yes.
Sorry. I saw river birch, which I think is the smaller branch brown type birch.
Yeah, it has a darker, yeah.
Okay, would that same area be good for the white birch?
White birch isn't really from this area. It's more northeast. It's more New England, and it doesn't like our summers. And often people stick it in the middle of the yard, and that's just so sad. So don't do that. I would say no. I would stick with the local natives and river birch. Look at the name. I mean, you know, it likes moist soil and it likes our environment. Okay. So what this is a list from Bowman's Hill Wildflower Preserve, which you must go visit, of deer tolerant or resistant native plants. And there are no deer resistant plants, except those that would poison them. So they're not going to eat your daffodils, for instance. So next time you want tulips, put tulips in with your daffodils.
Might eat the daffodils. They're like,
Uh-oh,
Because
a
there's
mutant
nothing else
deer
for
has
them.
developed in southeast Pennsylvania.
They'll go after anything, there's
I'm
nothing else
what just
available.
happened? They ate all my daffodils.
I'm sorry to hear that. Maybe it got a stomach ache afterwards. Anyway, these are less likely to be destroyed by the deer. They may get browsed, but they can take some of that. And the checks, I went through and I checked the plants that are also appropriate for rain gardens. So that's just another reference. There's a couple things I wanted to say in reference to what was said earlier. Well, when I'm done, then we will talk about a few places where you can buy the plants. To the gentleman with the weedy garden. Okay, let's just say we're starting from scratch, but you are going to have weeds. Yeah, please help yourself. You are going to have weeds, particularly because there's a lot of space between the first plantings. When you put in your plants, label them. So you'll be able to tell them from the weeds 3 weeks after you come back from Maine. Because they'll be as big as those plants. And you could also get phone applications that help you identify not only the ones you want, but the ones you don't want. And that might be a help, you know, because you still might have some valuable things in there. So you don't want the Boy Scouts coming in and just, no, you want to know where those good things are and put a stick or something by them and then let them take the rest. That's the only helpful thing I can say, but I do think you need a lot of hands. I'm sorry. Yes?
Would you suggest solarization for his area where he doesn't know what the plants are but doesn't want something there?
Well, that would be one way to go. I'm not a fan of the vinegar or the
okay.
so, but that's kind of personal preference.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's such a disaster, you have to start over, that could be a way.
Yeah. Solarization is just covered in cardboard,
Mm-hmm.
but then you got to be able to identify what you want to keep and what is a weed.
Yeah, that's usually, actually that is a technique that can be used. I know a master gardener who did this when he was putting in his rain garden.
Mm-hmm.
On the lawn, he solarized the lawn.
Yeah.
Now that takes, you know, that could take a season,
Yeah.
but it made it a lot easier to get that grass out because it was really, had good roots and there was a lot of it. So that is a technique for getting away, rid of unwanted vegetation.
I've also seen where people put the cardboard down, then they put about 4 or 5 inches of compost.
Yeah,
And then they can start to plant.
yeah, that's called
And
lasagna.
you can turn it over.
Yeah, because once that cardboard breaks
Yeah.
down, it's part of
That's part of the compost.
If you're in a hurry,
Did you just say that was called lasagna? Yeah.
well, actually, there's a layering you can use of newspaper, cardboard, soil, and then you could plant in it.
That's like the worst lasagna ever.
But it has a good taste.
It sounds like a good idea.
Okay, let's just move on because the evening's going on. So what I'm gonna do is just show you a few, like I say, a few pictures of plants. Now, this is a presentation on native plants, not rain garden plants, just keep that in mind. But we really wanna indoctrinate you tonight to go for native plants. Go, slide, please. So, and actually, this was a presentation meant to attract wildlife. Next. So, by definition, you already understand what a native plant is. Next. Okay, and wildlife needs these things, and that's what native plants will give them. Next. Okay, and once again, to reiterate, native plants will help to preserve biodiversity, protect water quality by controlling erosion, moderating flood and drought. And going down a little bit, I wish I put them in different order, hold soil in place with long roots. This is typical of native plants, they have longer roots. So not only do they anchor the soil, but they direct water down. So they don't have shallow roots, they'll be anchors and they'll help to get the water down. And because of this, go back up to bullet 3, requires less water usage, requires little or no fertilizer, reduces pollution because you don't need that fertilizer. In fact, if you're using compost and you're a good quality mulch, you probably don't use fertilizer. I don't see why you would use it. Once established, low maintenance. The first 2 years, maybe 3 years, you got to weed. You got to weed as long as those spaces are available. You have to mulch in between. But as they grow out, they will become a mulch of their own, so to speak. And of course, they're natural. They belong here, so they're naturally beautiful. Next. Okay, and like I said, there's all different ranks there of plant materials that are native. Next. So we're going to look at a few trees that you'll recognize as your native plants. Next. And there's a river birch on the right there, which is a good plant for moist soils. Next. And these are actually on the lists here, but they're large trees. So they could be on your property, but not in your rain garden. Next. You know, Eastern hemlock. Next. Okay, understory trees. You Might be able to get one of these in, like Madge said she'd put in a red bud, which is a good one. Next. And the dogwoods, believe it or not, we have our native dogwoods, and they can be healthy here if well maintained. Next. And the serviceberry, which actually is good in drier areas, but it's just a beautiful native tree. And on the right, the spice bush, the lindera. The very chartreusey leaf there is the color you get in the late summer, early fall. They get, the leaves turn yellow. So it looks very pretty in the landscape. And they will do good well in a moist area. Next. Winterberry. This is a colonizing, I'm sorry, I think of the one on the right. The Viburnum dentatum is more of a colonizing shrubby plant with many stems. And if you have a large space you want to fill in and almost be like a hedge, that's a great plant to put in. And they just got done blooming, I guess, about 2-3 weeks ago. They were gorgeous. I have a big mass of them in my backyard. It was just like looking at all these little dots of white. And those will give rise to berries for birds. And it likes moist soil. And then the winterberry also likes moist soil. Winterberry, though, you need both a male and a female plant. Female plant is going to be the one with the berries. They're both going to have flowers, but you need to have the male within like 20 feet or so, somewhere on your property, to make everything possible. Next. Okay, the red chokecherry. There's also a black chokecherry. They're equally wonderful. And the elderberry, that's what's happening right now with elderberry. Fantastic flower heads, make elderberry wine. And then the berries themselves, if you get the right, well, the native one, the canadensis, is edible once cooked. So the berries can be made into jam and such. But the wildlife loves it, so they might get all of it before you do. Also very good in moist soils. Next. Okay, and then a few vines and ground covers. And these really wouldn't be, this is because it was from a native plant talk. They wouldn't be really part of your rain garden, but they're beautiful on your property. The Virginia creeper, that's how it looks in the fall. It just gets to be a wonderful color. And it will have berries. And the left is a wonderful hummingbird magnet. Next. Okay, and these are more spring plants, what we call the spring ephemerals. So you'll see them in the springtime, and then they won't completely die away. The leaves will be left there, but their glorious time is in the spring, and they like shade more than they like sun. So, you know, if you have a rain garden that's in more on the shady side, you could have this in the vicinity or the top of the rain garden. They really aren't going to be inside the garden itself, right? Next. And then, of course, ferns. These are great in moist conditions, though they could also tolerate dryness. And they would also prefer shade. If there's to be sun, it should be morning sun. Okay, next. Okay, and here we are, the herbaceous perennials, but just a few. So once again, these are both spring ephemerals. Actually, the columbine foliage lasts a long time. Columbine really likes the dry soil, so put it up at the berm. But can you, and it's very early, and hummingbirds like it. So if you put that on the berm, then your rain garden's going to start to look like it's got a life. It'll be very beautiful and early blossoms, and then the Jack and Pulpit, once you have that, you'll always have it. It spreads dramatically, and it likes very moist conditions. Next. And then, of course, Solomon seal, and the Monarda prefers drier conditions, but that would be good near and around your garden. Next. And the blue vervain actually is in the list, the Penn State list there as a good rain garden plant, and the cardinal flower, both of them. Next. Okay, and Periopsis. There are several kinds of Periopsis, and some of them have different moisture conditions. So look at the list and see the different species. This is just a given species. And the rudbeckias, there's all different kinds of rudbeckias, and they can also tolerate different moist conditions. Next. Okay, turtle head. This is the native turtle head. And they call it that, chelonic, because the flower looks like a turtle's head. And there's another one that's a cultivar that's pink, light pink to dark pink. So you could have both. I have both. And they really do like moist soil. They will bloom late in the season, so they'll be in mid to late summer. So it's a nice ladder in the summer. And here you see the native coral bell, Heuchera Americana, growing right on a rocky slope. Like if you walk along the Periopsis, you'll see that. In fact, you'll see the columbine, and you'll see other things growing right out of the rock faces there on the Periopsis trail. Okay, next. And pieweed and swamp milkweed. Something with swamp in its name is going to be appropriate. Okay, next. And I love the whitewood aster. That's late summer. It's great in a shady place. It's just like little stars that are glowing in the dark. And then the New England aster. And these are on the list. Okay. Next. And the goldenrod is not so much a rain garden, but they're just wonderful native plants, and they're kind of misunderstood. There's a lot of different goldenrods, and they don't make you sneeze. And they're beautiful. So look into those and learn more about these plants. Next. I think that's it. There was one more thing I was going to say that came up in the talk, and now I'm trying to remember what it was. But also, I think this would be a wonderful summer read for everybody. This is professor of entomology at the University of Delaware, Douglas Calamy, who's been advocating for native plants because he sees them as the bedrock of the native environment, of the environment. So if we don't have native plants, we don't have native insects, we don't feed our native birds.
It's really important for the pollinators and for the pollinators too. Which if you don't have pollinators, you don't eat.
It's for everything.
Exactly.
And if you got kids who like bugs, there's wonderful pictures of bugs and insects in here. Things that they may see this summer. And it's a good kind of entryway book. Plus he's written 3 more. This is also in softback in an updated edition, and in the back he has lists of native plants for different growing conditions. So it's a very wonderful reference. And then this is one of his more recent books, Nature's Best Hope, which is more of the same, but he's trying to advocate this idea of a backyard national park. So when you start planting native plants and putting in the right conditions, you are helping to sustain part of our natural environment and create a national park that is just a patchwork of places everywhere.
Is his work specific to this region?
Yes, that's where he did all his research to substantiate exactly. He has ranked trees and plants on the number of species of insects that they support. So the oaks win. And he's written a book called The Oaks. That's his latest book. So I would say good summer reading to support everything. And finally,
And he's from the University of Delaware?
University of Delaware, Department of Entomology. And this is just a starter brochure. Okay, that's what I was supposed to do, give you some references.
Yes.
Okay,
Where do we buy?
okay, where can you buy?
Where do we shop?
I would say, first of all, if you've got a favorite nursery, ask them if they've got some native plants and see what they've got. Because you have to look a little bit afar to find just native plant nurseries. I would definitely go to Bowman's Hill Wildflower Preserve in New Hope and go to their website, just put that in and get their website. And they have a plant availability chart. They sell plants. You could call them and talk to them and tell them exactly what you're looking for. You should also go to MontTwp Center, which is in Heuchera, Delaware, which is totally devoted to native plants, and it's a beautiful property, park, to see, just to see, even if you don't, if you're living in an apartment, you know, and you just want to see beauty.
It's another.
MontTwp, C-U-B-A.
It's worth the drive, it's a beautiful place.
Yeah, it's a little-
to walk through.
You know, a bit of a drive, but it's
Yeah.
worth it. And this is what's worth it. They have a list of local retailers for native plant purchases. So go to their site, go to their resources, and list of local retailers. And from that, I picked a few that they have them over 4 states. Let's see, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware. I think that's it, 4 states. So in Pennsylvania, I was trying to figure out the ones closest to us. Gino's Nursery in Newtown. Gino's Nursery. So it's ginosnursery.com. And just look over their website and call them. And apparently, if they don't have it, they will get it for you. They'll try to get it for you.
They're very helpful, yeah.
Who's shopped there?
Oh, I have.
Okay, you could convert the crowd afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and Collins Nursery in Glenside sadly is closing the end of this month.
Oh.
But she had a private business, and you could go to her, collinsnursery.com right now, look at the plant availability list, and send her an email, don't call. She's an artist, and she's closing the business so she can work on her art. Then there is Edge of the Woods Native Plant Nursery up in Orfield, which is near Quakertown. Fantastic, worth a day trip. All native plants, woman-owned, woman-run, and they have demonstration gardens. You could see what they have available. And then other than that, there's some I haven't been, well, no, out near me, I live in Audubon, Schwenksville, Bemerwald Nursery. Now they're a broad nursery, but they do have native plants.
What's it called again?
Bemerwald, B-E-H-M-E-R-W-A-L-D, Bemerwald Nursery, on Gargus Road in Schwenksville. So if you go to MontTwp, go to their list of resources, local retailers, you'll see all these, and go to Pennsylvania, you'll see all these, and with the addresses and everything. And when you click on the name, it sends you right to the website. So that's why I didn't, just go to these websites and get your information that way.
Bemerwald is all native plants.
No, it's not all wet, but they're tending more toward that way. The other thing, the final little refinement that you might discover in the process of all of this is, you're going to hear this word cultivar. What it is a cultivated variety of what we call a straight species. So these are called straight species. This is the way they exist in nature, and they are identified by genus and a species name. If you see a name after the genus or after both the genus and the species name that's in single quotes, that is the cultivar name. And they're often named after people or ideas or marketing. And what they've done is they've grown out a occurring variety that they came across that has desirable characteristics and will sell. And it could be size or color or shape or whatever. There's a lot of purists who say get only a straight species. But cultivars can be useful, and sometimes they're the best you can do, as long as they still are accessible to the wildlife that depends on them. Like, you don't want a winterberry that has such a big berry that the bird can't get it in its beak. And you don't want a flower that's so elaborate the pollinator doesn't even bother with it. So these are things you will learn, and you could always ask questions. And what questions do you have for me now? Because we could go on and on.
I just want to give a plug for the Master Gardener program in Montgomery County, and I'm in Bucks County. But you have a hotline.
We do.
Okay.
Okay.
If you have questions, you can call the hotline.
Yeah. Also, I think on here, I've got the addresses. Okay.
Oh, is it on?
Yeah, extension.psu.edu/plants, plant gardening, or there's is /hotline. And you could also, you should know where your extension office is in Montgomery County. It is where? Where is it?
Coronary Road.
Very good, very good. It's on Route 113, which is Bridge Road, just a little bit south and west of the west end of Skippack. And we have demonstration gardens, so you can come and see what's growing and what's going on. But they have a hotline there, and you could call and isn't the number on here too? Uh-oh. Okay, it's, let's see, 610, 489-4315, I believe. And I know I had another piece of literature with that on it. But call the hotline and ask them questions, ask them for any information that you may need. And if they don't have the answer when they pick up the phone, they will get you the answer. There you go. So, yeah, 610-489-4315. And you could go to Montgomery MG at PSU.edu and get on an email list. They'll send you regular emails. Yeah, so it's extension.psu.edu/garden-hotline. So there's a lot of information out there, and I wish you all the best. You know, you may start with small plants, but they'll grow out. The other thing is at this time of year, we're going to go into the hot season, and I'm almost thinking it might be just good to do all your setup and all your digging and getting everything ready and put the mulch on to hold the soil down, and then plant in the fall. Yeah, and then you can see how it drains too. I mean, even without plants in it, you'll get some idea about how it's going to drain. But you could get started on it, you could lay it out, get your equipment together, line up your help. I don't know, Madge, what would you say? Would you tell them to wait or not?
Typically, yeah, we prefer to do the planting. Our rain garden season really was the spring and the fall.
Yeah.
July and August, it can be, yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And if you buy large plants that are flowering, you know, they're going to be struggling. So in the fall, what you really have happen is that you get root growth, and that's what you want. So put your plants in the fall. You can start that in August, because the nights get cool in August. So late August, mid to late August. But the weeks are going to go fast. So
yeah, we would plant rain gardens. I mean, now that we're getting a little bit warmer, I mean, into late November. I think we even put a rain garden in like the last week in November.
yeah.
Early December.
And the ground doesn't
Do it like
freeze
6
until
to 8
summer.
weeks before your first frost. And you can,
Mulch it over really well.
Yeah, do that. You know, if the ground isn't frozen, yeah. Okay, I'm going to call it a night because thank you for being so patient.